Rachel Bristow is a 27-year-old elementary school teacher living in flyover country. You've never heard of her. But she grew up attending church infrequently and then casually left her faith in college. It was a slow drift driven by the quiet allure of online fads, self-help influencers, and progressive online content. Rachel wouldn't say that social media changed her, but it did. She spends 4 to 6 hours every day online, shopping, scrolling Instagram, watching TikTok, streaming Netflix. She is almost completely unaware that every piece of content she engages with, news articles, blogs, videos, images, and ads, were supplied to her by a sophisticated recommender algorithm. She never contemplates that everywhere she hovers on screen, stops the scroll, clicks the ad, or reads a piece of content, her actions are tracked. Or that her facial expressions and videos and photos, where she lives and travels and whom she associates with, all of this is collected by these big media organizations. She never stops to think about the fact that the information she supplied about herself in emails and during online purchases has been cataloged and sold until nearly every app, streaming service, and online store she frequents knows more about her than even her closest friends. To Rachel, what she sees online is simply a serendipitous parade of entertaining content. But the truth is more dark. What she experiences online is no accident. Her slow drift from faith was algorithmically engineered by media organizations that want her trust, attention, and subscription fees. They want their platforms to be her church, their influencers to be her pastor, and their pages to be her scripture, so they can sell her more stuff. Rachel's media diet gradually transformed her into a statistic, into the kind of person who checks none, N-O-N-E, when asked about her religious self-identification, making her a member of the largest, fastest-growing religious demographic in America. To ruin Rachel's faith, big media only needed one thing: Rachel's data. That's why tech and media CEOs all agree with Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella, who said, "Data is the new currency." Everyone wants to change Rachel's habits and keep Rachel's attention, so they all seek to know everything they can about Rachel, collecting her personal data with abandon. Everyone, that is, except for Christians. Let me tell you the story of how Rachel became a statistic. It's a story of the dechurching of America. You see, Rachel's story isn't unusual. In 2021, our organization, Endeavor, helped fund the largest qualitative and quantitative study of dechurching ever undertaken in America, working with world-class researchers to determine, 1, how many Americans have left the church, 2, why they're leaving, and 3, what can be done to stop this sociological shift. Their findings were collected in what is probably the most important book of 2021 for Christian leaders. It's called The Great Dechurching by Mike Graham and Jim Davis. Their study revealed that we are currently living through the largest religious shift in American history. 45 million Americans have dechurched in the last 2 decades. Contrary to popular assumptions, most Americans aren't leaving the church in anger. They're leaving casually. Why? Social media and online entertainment have slowly boxed Jesus out of their lives. Remarkably, we learned that most Americans remain open to returning to church. That means that if Christians want to see Gen Z and millennials in churches, they only need to invite them. To do that, they need to go where those generations live, the internet. Of course, Christians are already online, that's obvious, but they're losing the war for the soul of America. Why? Not because of a paucity of content, but because they're fighting cutting-edge secular media, armed to the teeth with big data and machine learning with, the Christians at least, using last-generation technology. Until Christians realize that we are in a technological arms race with secular media for data, we'll only know the thrill of Pyrrhic battles. We'll never win the war. So let's talk about the data arms race. Today's legacy Christian media organizations were launched by the previous generation's greatest pastors, speakers, and thinkers. These individuals all excelled at communication. They created content and developed blogs and publications to disseminate it. If they met Rachel Bristow, they would assume that her problem was a lack of knowledge and that the solution is the same as it's always been: create more content. But they, just like Rachel, don't comprehend our data-driven, algorithmic media environment. They assume that big names, celebrities, brand recognition, and quality content can win the war against big media. But that's like using muskets in a battle against AI-operated drones. No seminary taught these founding communicators what they needed to know for the era of the smartphone, big data, and social media. And it's this: data infrastructure is everything. Media companies are no longer content mills. They are data and technology corporations. Now, I write about the lack of knowledge in Christian organizations, not from a place of judgment, not with self-righteousness. Even world-class secular media orgs like the New York Times were slow to realize the change. But after Jeff Bezos bought the Washington Post in 2013 and pioneered new data-driven strategies to drastically improve its subscription revenue, everything changed. Data collection became the chief goal of every media org. Once they began to strategically collect that data, they swiftly realized that collection is not an end in and of itself. Data needs to be refined, algorithmically analyzed, and deployed for meaningful purposes. Information needs to be transformed into actionable insights. By 2018, the New York Times had collected enough user data to launch Project Feels. It's an AI-driven tool that's able to predict the emotional impact of individual articles on readers before publication. They use this information to sell ads and increase subscriptions by manipulating the emotions of their readers. Legacy Christian media never caught up. In most Christian media orgs, user data is stored haphazardly, unclean data stored across multiple databases. It's collected at random. User behavior is rarely tracked. Demographic data is rarely requested. It's left inert and unanalyzed. It's never used to create funnels, user journeys, lookalike audiences, and it's deployed indiscriminately. The data we do have is limited. Almost none of it creates actionable insights. As a generational regime change occurs across Christian media, new leaders and boards match the profiles of their predecessors. They aren't data analysts, they're pastors, writers, and thinkers. Their seminaries didn't prepare them to operate technology companies, skilled at collecting, analyzing, and deploying data to reach more people with the gospel. Furthermore, most of these Christian media orgs are entrenched in pitched theological, political, and cultural battles with one another. They believe they're competing with one another for user attention, but the truth is that far more frightening than that. They're competing with Disney, Netflix, the New York Times, YouTube, and TikTok for attention. Christian media is doing so poorly in this fight that even troll farms run by nefarious international actors seeking to destabilize democracy have outperformed them. In 2019, 19 of the top 20 Christian Facebook pages were run by foreign troll farms. Rachel Bristow, her life is being shaped and formed by secular media because she hardly sees anything from Christian media orgs online. Yeah, these media orgs can churn out immeasurable hours of content, but none of it matters because they're losing the data battle. Muskets never beat war drones. To rescue young people like Rachel Bristow, a Christian media org would need to develop tools strong enough to compete with and subvert big secular media. It would need to approximate the scale and quality of competitors like Disney, the New York Times, TikTok, Meta, and Netflix. Let's imagine what tools and resources such an organization would need to be successful. First of all, it would need a massive, comprehensive user database. It would need a well-structured user database incorporating tens of millions of contacts, all with relevant data points, including demographic information, psychographic data, personal interests, beliefs, online behaviors, and content engagement. It would also need massive data capacity. It would need the capacity to secure, handle, store, and analyze vast amounts of data. To do this, it would need to develop and maintain a robust data infrastructure, including high-capacity data storage and powerful computing capabilities. But having the data isn't enough. We need strategic data collection. This organization would need clear strategic objectives to identify and define which data would be most useful, and then calibrate their efforts to gather that information. It would need to track user behavior, including website activity and email, ad, and social media engagement. This organization would also need data analysis and insights. It would need to identify patterns and trends in user behavior, segmenting users into distinct groups based on their characteristics and behaviors in order to predict and guide future user behavior. It would also need machine learning. To generate these insights at scale, it would need to use AI to analyze large data sets. Algorithms would recognize patterns and make predictions, enabling the org to personalize its content, predict how users will respond to different types of content, and then optimize their marketing strategies. They would also need the strategic deployment of data in ads using best marketing practices. It would use data to target ads and personalize ads and content and calls to action to individual users. It would use lookalike audiences to expand its reach on massive platforms. Moreover, it would track the effectiveness of different ads by adjusting strategies accordingly. It would also need knowledge and human resources. This organization would need to identify, vet, and hire world-class talent in data, technology, and marketing. Existing staff would need training in these areas. Executive-level leadership would actively integrate data-driven approaches into the organization's strategy. They'd also need to develop revenue funnels. It would use data insights to create user funnels designed to increase donor volume, subscription revenue, and product sales. Likewise, it would increase ad inventory space by growing overall page views and engagement. Unfortunately, this organization I've just described in detail only exists in my imagination. At the moment, I know of no single Christian media organization utilizing all of these tools for at least 3 reasons. 1, they lack technological knowledge. 2, they lack funding. Or 3, they lack the data and infrastructure. This means that no Christian media org can compete with big media today, which means no one can effectively reach Rachel Bristow or anybody like her, no matter how open she is to Jesus. So let's talk about how to rescue Rachel. You should know this. Rachel's name is fabricated, but Rachel's story is not. She's a real person with a true eternal destiny. And here's the good news. God found Rachel. Before she turned 30, Rachel gave her life to Jesus, returned to church, and turned her back on the worldly wisdom big media algorithmically fed her. But what specifically changed in Rachel's life? It was a daily devotional podcast, 10-minute Bible talks. She found it through a data-driven ad campaign that was targeting casually dechurched people, which was operated by my church, The Crossing. Now, we were able to target her because we spent years, literal years, growing a database of dechurched people, mostly by offering email devotionals via Meta. And then we used that data to create lookalike audiences on Meta platforms. In other words, you give Meta a list of email contacts and ask them to help you target ads to people who are on their platforms that are similar to those people. Once the ad is live, Meta's algorithm continues to optimize the ad, putting that ad in front of people it expects will click your call to action. But it's not just Meta that's doing the analysis. Our team does the same thing simultaneously. We are regularly analyzing ad results, pouring more resources into ads that get clicks, and pulling resources from ads that aren't landing well. The better an ad does, the less it costs per click, meaning that careful analysis of ads creates cost savings and results. Of course, all of this is totally invisible to Rachel. She doesn't know why 10-minute Bible Talks keeps reappearing on her social media feed instead of her latest self-help podcast. But eventually, Rachel got interested. She clicked the ad. She began to listen, and her life was transformed. And she now knows the most important thing. Jesus loves her, and he will never let her go. She's been attending church ever since. Using our data infrastructure and strategies, we've collectively reached hundreds of thousands of Rachel Bristows across the United States, introducing them to Jesus and revitalizing their faith. We've seen well over 1,000 dechurched people get connected to churches right here locally through these ad campaigns. Now, you may be asking a question, will our digital strategies help or hurt the church? Well, as I've said in other places, the incentive structures of the social internet tend to favor Christian media orgs who actively deconstruct and critique the church rather than supporting the church. It's part of why Christianity Today's top 20 articles for 2022 were dominated by stories about scandal and abuse. I wouldn't be surprised if the same thing happens in 2023. This is what people want to read. You see, no one on the editorial board at CT had a grand mission to focus on those things, but the algorithms tend to promote and propel scandal to the top because they create emotion. When you see these kinds of results, it's hard to resist the desire to continue writing more stuff in that vein to get more clicks. And this is precisely why churches and media orgs committed to constructive endeavors, building up the church, have to be extra strategic. The algorithm will not help you. It will actively work against you. But by developing a database of the kind of people you want to reach and creating constructive content that they want to consume, and floating ads for that content into their media stream, and then inviting them to church, you can make a real impact. In future videos, I will unpack a lot more about how churches and media orgs can do this. If you want to know more about how we do this, I'm going to unpack exactly that in future videos. So make sure to hit subscribe, and I'll see you next time.